Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Welcome to a brand new video. In today's video, I have another important book review, inshallah. And this is Ibn Taymiyyah's classic, very classic here, The Friends of Allah and the Friends of Shaytan. And this book is very important. And this is one of the works from Ibn Taymiyyah that is highly, highly recommended because of what's going on today. Now, a lot of people do not actually like Ibn Taymiyyah because Ibn Taymiyyah basically made a lot of enemies. Because basically, if you read the writings of Ibn Taymiyyah, he basically so-called address all the issues. For example, he addressed the people who goes to the grave and call out to the dead people in the grave. He goes out and address the people who deny the names and attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and so on and so forth. So throughout his life, he actually made a lot of enemies, which is why he was actually imprisoned 3 times. And he died whilst he was in prison. And his prominent student, one of his prominent students, Ibn al-Jawzi, accompanied him for the final 16 years of his life, around there also. And so, Ibn Taymiyyah has been criticized by a lot of people that have not actually read his writings. And majority of the people call his views extreme, so on and so forth here. But all that he does is actually telling the people to go back to the Quran and the Sunnah. Right? And so, the people who criticizes Ibn Taymiyyah, there are only few of them that have actually read his works, read some of his works, if not all his works. The majority of the people that criticizes Ibn Taymiyyah have not actually understood his argument, have not actually understood his writings, and have not taken the time to actually not strawman him. If you go on YouTube and you watch videos about people refuting Ibn Taymiyyah or making videos against Ibn Taymiyyah, a lot of the time you find that the arguments are actually strawman. And that is not the position of Ibn Taymiyyah. For example, when he wrote his Aqidatul Wasitiyah, he was also accused of anthropomorphism, whereby the people around him accuses him of likening Allah like the creations. For example, when they read about Ibn Taymiyyah saying that Allah, we must affirm that Allah has hands, 2 hands, right hand and left hand. So they're accusing Ibn Taymiyyah of saying that Allah has hands like human being, but that is actually not his argument. And so there's a lot of straw men. So a lot of straw men. And the people who actually disagree with Ibn Taymiyyah, only a few of them actually disagree without strawmanning him. And so Ibn Taymiyyah is not the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Right? Neither do everybody else, lesser than that. Right? The scholars that came later on, they're not from amongst the companions, from amongst the Sahaba. So, for example, when Ibn Taymiyyah wrote his Majmu' Fatawa, right, compilation of his fatwa, doesn't mean that it is a precedence for people to actually take exactly. There's room for disagreement. But the room for disagreement must be done within the Quran and the Sunnah. And so nobody is saying that Ibn Taymiyyah should be taken for everything that he says. And so that is not the argument of the people who actually admire his work, who actually look up to him, and who actually pray for him. May Allah actually grant him Jannah for all his efforts and his contributions. But a lot of the time, it's very sad to hear and to see that people actually do not take the time to understand Ibn Taymiyyah's argument, whatever he wrote, whatever he presented. And if you analyze his writing, he actually goes back to the Quran and the Sunnah, the Atharic Creed, for example. But the people, because Ibn Taymiyyah addresses a lot of the people, right? The Qadari, a lot of the different sect if not all, he addressed even the philosophers. And so he made a lot of enemies. And naturally, when you actually inform people who wants to go and pray at the grave, right, who wants to actually call upon the dead people or call upon other people who are not there, right? And so naturally, you will have a lot of enemies. And when you have enemies, you have people who try to bring you down. But nevertheless, his case is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. May Allah reward him greatly for the things that he has done. And Ibn Taymiyyah is not the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, nor is he the companions. And so we should not take everything that he says. But one thing we should be clear is that we should not belittle him, because he is no doubt one of the great scholars that Islam has ever produced. And people should actually entertain his argument and not misrepresent him. And so one of his very, very famous work, or in fact one of his strongest work, or one of the top work that he has written, I would say it is The Friends of Allah and the Friends of Shaytan. In this, he actually gave us the criteria in terms of the people who claims to be the wali of Allah, the friend of Allah, right? The supporter of Allah, the people who have been divinely appointed by Allah. His criteria is actually very simple. Anybody who claims to be a wali of Allah, who claims to be close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we should look at their teachings. Are they teaching us in accordance to the Quran and the Sunnah? Or are they teaching us accordance to something else? If they are teaching us in accordance to the Quran and the Sunnah, then we can take this person. But that doesn't mean that this person is actually divinely appointed wali. Meaning Allah has chosen him to be a wali. In fact, those people who are really the wali of Allah, they will not declare themselves as the wali of Allah. The people who are the awliya of Allah, they will not declare themselves that I am the awliya of Allah, and so you should follow me or you should listen to me. No, these people, they don't even know that they have been chosen as the awliya of Allah. It is not until they die, once they pass away, then people actually start to realize that this person is a pious person. Right? This person has contributed so much to Islam. And so he became the wali of Allah, or they became the awliya of Allah after they passed away. Not in the lifetime of Imam Ahmad, for example, Imam Shafi'i, Imam Nawawi, Imam or Ibn Taymiyyah. Never did they declare themselves as the wali of Allah. Right? Never did they declare themselves as the wali of Allah or call people towards them. Right? In fact, Imam Ahmad mentioned that people should not take his fatwa. Right? People should actually look at all the different fatwas that has been given, and people should, not actually take him. And so, the people that actually contributed greatly to Islam, who teaches the Quran and the Sunnah, they don't call people towards themselves. They call people towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is in contrary to the people in certain parts of the world that we have today, whereby they call people towards themselves. And they have the audacity, they should fear Allah, they have the audacity to actually say that I am the Imam of this community, or that I am the Imam of this sect of Islam. And so they have the audacity to declare themselves. But if you look at the scholars of Islam, those really, really high scholars, they are even scared. Right? When people call themselves a sheikh or ustaz, they are scared. Because why? They know that only Allah is worthy of all praise. And so they are afraid that people might actually take them for who they are. And no doubt these are scholars. These are scholars who have written fatwas, who have written book on fiqh. They never call people towards themselves. And so people should fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to the best of their abilities. And we should fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to to the best of our abilities. No doubt we fumble and we stumble. We are not the Prophet, we are not the companions. Our iman is not as high as Umar bin Khattab, radiallahu anhu. Our iman is not as high as the companions. And so we should also, relax a little bit. We should not put ourselves, or we should not set our target so high that we know we will never achieve. If we are able to achieve the status of the companions, if we are able to achieve the iman of the companions, no doubt Allah would have made us amongst that generation. So we should relax a little bit, all right? But that doesn't mean that we should lower our threshold so low until whereby we don't even have to work for it. No, we should maintain a certain degree, and each of us are different, and so we should set our own target. But set it honestly. Set it honestly. These are the targets that we want to meet. This is the level of iman that we want to reach. No doubt iman fluctuates like waves, right? But we want to get to a point whereby even if our iman is very low, we will not abandon the salah. Because there are people out there whose imans are very low, and so they take a break. Maybe they skip Dhuhr, for example, or they skip Fajr. Right? So we want to gradually build ourselves up so that even if our iman is very low, we have taqwa of Allah, we fear Allah, and we put our faith in Allah, and then we still pray, even if we are not sincere. But we still pray, because why? Allah has commanded us to pray. And if we still pray, meaning we fear Allah, right? Our fear also varies. And so we fear Allah, maybe we might not give Allah His due rights, meaning we fear Him with utmost fear. Maybe we fear Him a little bit, but at least we fear Him. Because who else is there when affliction falls upon us can remove these afflictions from us? No one. And so this book I highly recommend you, The Friends of Allah and the Friends of Shaytan. The criteria that is very basic to determine whether a person is the awliya of Allah or not is whether they call us to the teachings of the Quran and the Sunnah, or their teachings is completely off. And obviously Ibn Taymiyyah goes deeper. He addresses a lot of the matters here. He gives examples and so forth here. But the criteria is very simple. And if there's one thing that I take away from this book, is that now I know how to determine between the awliya of Allah and the awliya of Shaytan. Before I end, inshallah, when we explore the people who actually call upon others towards themselves, it means they ask people to follow them. Majority of the time, they preach a kind of prosperity gospel. And this is prominent amongst the other faith as well. Most of the time, money is always involved. And so this should also be a red flag. The people who actually genuinely wants to spread the knowledge of Islam amongst the community, they are the ones who will not actually ask you for even a dime. They will give the knowledge freely to you. They will not hold back, because they understand the hadiths, that we should not hold back any knowledge. And if people ask us any questions, we should answer them to the best of our knowledge. And we should speak to the people in accordance to their level of understanding. But majority of the time, when we see all these people that call others upon themselves, money is always involved, to the point whereby they became so rich. And so that should be a red flag. Now, I'm not saying that everybody who asks you to pay them, right, or who accepts your zakah willingly, or even maybe a little force it upon you a little bit, I'm not saying that all their teachings are bad. And I'm not saying that you should, stop listening to them, so on and so forth. But you should also have some degree of caution. You should also practice self-protection. And you should study the Quran and the Sunnah. And if anybody calls you to say that, you don't have to read the Quran and the Sunnah. Leave it to me to interpret it for you. This is also another red flag. Because what these people intend to do is they intend to keep you amongst they intend to keep you ignorant, because you will not be able to call out to them and say that, hey, I thought the Quran says something else, but you're teaching something else. But unfortunately, people want shortcut, and people will always find shortcuts very appealing. For example, we have a group today whereby their sheikh told their murid, told their students, you don't have to worry about the 3 fundamental questions in the grave. When the time comes for you, I will whisper it to your ear. And so people find this very appealing. I don't have to worry about Islam. I don't have to worry about all these questions in the grave, because why? My sheikh will save me. My sheikh will intercede for me. Right? And so this is shortcut. People always wants to take the shortcut, but there's no shortcut in Islam. There's no shortcut in Islam. And any shortcut that we take is not worth it in the end. It's not worth it. It is better for us to actually put our time and effort. Put our time and effort, consistently learn about the deen, learn about the religion. Not for anybody else, but to protect ourselves. So that we will not be gullible and we will not be preyed by people who want to take advantage of us. Sheikh Ibn Taymiyyah mentioned in one of his work, in his commentary to Aqidah Wasitiyah, the people, the believers, should equip themselves not with weapons. We should equip ourselves with knowledge. And one thing I disagree, and people will disagree with me on this, is that when I started learning Islam as well, when I started learning Islam, people always told me that you shouldn't read by yourself. You shouldn't study by yourself. You should always, at all times, study with the people of knowledge. Right? And so it becomes very difficult for me, because I have these books and I want to read these books, but then people say I cannot read this book because why? Or you might be studying with Shaytan. You will be you are leading yourself astray. And so it became like a fumbling block for me to begin with. And it put me off a little bit, because now I have to go to the masjid and learn the hadiths from people there. Now I have to go to the masjid, and so every time it becomes a hassle for me. Why? I have this book, I have this Kitab al-Tawheed, I have this book. Why can't I just open it and read it? People are discouraging me from reading it, because why? You might be studying with Shaytan. You might be reading with Shaytan. Right? And so it really discouraged me until a point whereby, there's some truth in what they say, no doubt. There's some truth in what they say, no doubt. They are right. They are, because this is based on what the scholars advise. But at the same time, we should not deprive ourselves of self-studying, of knowledge, especially in this modern day and age whereby we have knowledge everywhere. Now, obviously, we must do our due diligence to make sure that the sources that we take from is actually authentic, is actually correct. And so people were discouraging me from reading books, right? For example, if I have this book and people told me that you shouldn't read this book, you shouldn't read this book because Ibn Taymiyyah is so and so. So a lot of people say about Ibn Taymiyyah so and so, so and so. Right? And so this is the opinion that I have. People told me that you shouldn't read the book of Muhammad bin Abdul Wahab because he killed Muslims, so, right? And when you read his Kitab al-Tawheed, you become extremist. And so people are feeding me with this kind of one-sided opinion. It's the same when people told me that Christianity is this, Judaism is this, Hinduism is this. But those people have not even read the literatures. And they just hear it from hearsay. And so when I read Ibn Taymiyyah, right? When I read his Aqidatul Wasitiyah, this is exactly what the Quran says. When I read Kitab al-Tawhid, this is exactly what the Quran says. Right? Now, when we read a scholarly work, that doesn't mean we support or we agree with the political view of the scholars or whatever the scholars have done. We should separate between the work that they have produced, and we should separate between the figure itself. We want to benefit from people whose writings actually goes back to the Quran and the Sunnah. And how do we know if we did not even read their literatures? And then we adopt the opinions of the people around us without actually having read what these people actually say. Right? And so when I read Ibn Taymiyyah, especially this book, when I read The Friends of Allah and The Friends of Shaytan, this is exactly what the Quran and the Sunnah says. And so the people who wants to innovate in the religion, they will obviously create the impression to the people so that people do not actually entertain their opponents or their enemies. But us as human beings, we should be fair, we should be just. Which is why when I started learning about Christianity, I read from the evangelical literatures as well as I read from the more liberal literatures. And I also read what the Muslims wrote about Christianity, what Jews wrote about Christianity. And so I built a comprehensive understanding, and I am able to put myself in this person's shoes, understand it from this angle, why this person say like this, why the evangelical Christians do what they do, why the liberal Christians claim that the gospel authors are not what the tradition says it is. So your knowledge not suddenly become vast, and you are not being shallow, you are not being biased. Obviously, everybody has their biases, but it is a different thing to recognize your bias and not recognize your bias. And so, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to be fair, any literatures that you come across, any literatures, if people say that you shouldn't read these literatures, the more you should read it. And build your own opinion. Build your own opinion. Right? Now, scholars will definitely advise against what I've just advised you. And they are right, because I recognize that not everybody, not every literature belongs to or should be read by everybody. I understand this. But for example, if you read a book on Daif Hadith and you do not even know what Daif basically means, basically you found a book whereby it narrates all the fabricated hadiths, and you read this hadith and you start teaching this hadith or you start sharing this hadith, this is a major calamity, this is a major disaster. Or you start reading works that are published by historians that are known to be non-historical, meaning that their methodology is flawed. And then you start believing these stories and then you start sharing it to other people. This is a disaster, this is a calamity. Right? But Alhamdulillah, in terms of Islamic literatures, the major Islamic literatures, there's actually a fatwa on whether you can read these books or not, and the different levels. Right? So there's actually a fatwa on whether you can read books such as this or not. And inshallah, when you actually refer to the fatwa online, it will give you an understanding as to what this book is, so on and so forth. And the other thing is also to have, to build a community of people that have knowledge, and they can advise you whether this literature is of your level or whether this literature is worthy for you to read at the moment, right? And so these people should know you. These people should know you, right? And also, last and finally, you should always listen to what the people online have to say about these literatures, from the pro side and also from the con side. Right? And it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of research. Right? But as long as you read works that are published by prominent publishers, for example, Darus Sunnah, Darul Makkah, Darus Salam, Dakwah Corner of Kuala Lumpur, different other publications. So as long as you read literatures that are published by these kind of publishers, majority of the time it's okay for you to read. Because, for example, you will have the publishers sometimes making notes and say this hadith is da'if, or this is actually not the right opinion, so on and so forth here. Right? So you do get some kind of safety net, so to speak. Right? And I've come this across many times by Darul Sunnah, by Darul Salam, Darul Makkah, so on and so forth. And so these are literatures by publishers which you can actually consume. But nevertheless, it's always best to refer to the fatwa, and it's even better if you need to build a community of people around you, the students of knowledge, and they will be able to advise you better. It will be very irresponsible for me to make this video without giving this disclaimer, especially in the topic of Ibn Taymiyyah, because new Muslims, when they heard about Ibn Taymiyyah, they always have heard about Ibn Taymiyyah based from the people who actually warned against Ibn Taymiyyah. And those people actually strawman Ibn Taymiyyah. And this is the same. When I heard about Ibn Taymiyyah or Muhammad bin Abdul Wahhab, may Allah have mercy on them. Right? So I built this impression until I actually read their works. And Alhamdulillah, they are upon the Quran and the Sunnah. Alhamdulillah. They condemn the people of innovations. And they actually have the right Athari Aqidah, which is the Aqidah of the companions, the Hanabali Aqidah, which is what we want to go towards. They do not have all this kalam, they do not reject the attributes of Allah, so on and so forth. And they do not apply a different meaning. Right? And for cases like whereby Allah has hands, right, eyes, so on and so forth, ears, we do not deny this. They do not deny this. But they also do not, how do you say, they do not take it whereby this is actually exactly what human hands looks like. Right? Because there's none that looks like Allah. There's nothing compared to Him. So ladies and gentlemen, I recommend you to read this book, especially for the people who believe in a wali, who goes to a person who declares themselves as wali, who declares themselves as the imam of your group, of your sect. And those people who actually say that you shouldn't read the Quran, you shouldn't read the hadith, you should just allow me to interpret for you the Quran. Or the people that say that you do not need to make salah, you do not need to fast Ramadan, the Sharia have been abrogated for you, meaning there's no more Sharia. But then when it comes to the zakah, they say, oh no, you should still pay the zakah, physical money. There's no esoteric meaning or esoteric interpretation, right, of Salah. There's no esoteric interpretation of Ramadan. There's esoteric interpretation of Salah. There's esoteric interpretation of Ramadan, fasting. Right? But when it comes to money, no, you should still pay. You should still pay money, right? Because I'm your imam, right? You should still pay me, right? I'm divinely appointed. And so these are red flags, ikhwan, akhawan. These are red flags. And so, again, we should always know the criteria to determine who is a fraudster, who is a con man, and who is actually upon the Quran and the Sunnah. Nevertheless, Allah is the one who guides. And Allah is the one who grants success. And we should always make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We should not depend, because it is our akhirah. It is our akhirah. It is our afterlife. Why should I entrust my afterlife to anybody? Especially if that person is preaching shortcut. Wouldn't you want to question what that person teaches is actually true? And so human beings, we should not just let the matter rest just like that. Especially when it comes to heaven or hell. We believe in heaven or hell. Why should I trust you? Right? Why should I trust you? I don't even know you that well. And so, ladies and gentlemen, we should use our intellect more, exercise our intellect. We have intellect, but a lot of us don't exercise. I mean, we don't use it in the correct way. And we want to take shortcut. And so, not all shortcut, especially shortcut in the deen, in the religion, this will only lead to our own demise. And we have ourselves to blame, basically. Nevertheless, I'll see you guys in my next one. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.